My name's Aftab. I'm a GP trainee and a doctor now for about 5 years.
So to get into it, you're British Pakistani.
That's right.
My mother's side of the family are from Pakistan. And what do you think about the food?
Best food on the planet, bro. So very tasty, very flavoursome. Certainly, I think lots of questions to be asked in terms of how healthy it is, especially as there has been a lot of spotlight put on the role of diet in sort of disease states. That has now led us, especially in the UK, where we have a large South Asian community, so a large Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi community, that we have now started to ask some serious questions about to what extent diet in these particular groups of people, to what extent that is contributing to disease.
Could you just tell us, how does the South Asian diet really impact health in short and long term?
So I guess the first point that I would make is, for sure, bro, that for people who come from that culture or people who've got friends in that culture, food is a big part of that social construct. So it's something that we all enjoy, but I think the question is we want to enjoy it for as long as we can in the most healthy way possible. So it's about just asking questions about how we can enjoy the things that we enjoy without having some of the negatives that can come along with that. So for example, if we take the typical South Asian diet, we both have some Pakistani heritage. So if we look at like Pakistani food, it's a lot of curries. Curries are made with lots of oil. The oil content in them is very high. Traditionally speaking, they were made with a very specific ingredient called ghee, which all of those things basically have a high level of saturated fat within them. So the problem is that if consumed over long periods of time, that can make a patient's cholesterol levels very high. So, and that over time can then lead to the development of things like cardiovascular disease, can lead to an increased risk of diabetes, can lead to increased risks of obesity, which can then in turn lead to a higher risk of the previous two. So lots of different things. If people are more obese, they have more body mass, that can then put strain on their joints, which can then lead to musculoskeletal problems. So there's lots of health implications.
Yeah. So what's the solution then? Because you can't really tell people just stop eating the food that for generations has so much history.
Yeah.
What?
And that tastes so good.
Exactly. You know? So what can we actually do as a community to, I guess, maintain what we love so dearly and cherish, but also not have that detrimental impact on our health?
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a really good question. I think, so if I put myself into the position of, as a GP, if I'm seeing one of my patients and one of my patients comes in and they say, they ask me that exact question. They say, okay, you know what? I love eating all of this food, but how do I make it a bit more healthy? One of the questions that I would first of all ask is, to what extent are they eating these unhealthy foods to what regularity are they consuming these foods? So you don't need to be consuming these foods all the time, every day. So we could probably come up with a compromise where they eat these foods on certain occasions, for example, if they have like family events, etc. But then other times of the day, for example, in the morning for their breakfast, they might have healthier alternatives. Okay. So it's about letting people enjoy what they like, but then decreasing the frequency a little bit, but not removing it completely, and then increasing the frequency a little bit of foods which are healthier, which they may not have been eating before. So for example, in our culture, Pakistani culture, and especially if you go to that part of the world, they don't, for example, eat a lot of salad. That's not really something which is really a part of like that particular part of the world. But if we look at those particular people of that descent who live in the Western world, we can get salad quite readily. So that's something which could be, quite a simple solution. So increase the quantity of that. In our culture, though, they do like to eat a lot of fruit, but sometimes the fruits that they like to eat, like mango, when it's mango season, we've all had the mangoes from Pakistan. So yes, exactly. So, but they could substitute those fruits with other fruits which are less sugary, but that might have, better health benefits. So for example, something like, oranges or like tangerines or something like that, something that have got high vitamin C content as well. So small things like that, I would probably look at initially.
Yeah. What about like switching ingredients as well? Like replacing, I don't know, using different type of oils in the dishes and things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that can be a good alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, so I'm not sure exactly I can't give specific advice about, how exactly you would swap different ingredients. But there is a lot of information out there, and that has been something which a lot of people have looked at. And I've seen some things on social media about like viral videos that have gone out where people have been able to make traditional dishes with significantly less oil content, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's also something that can be looked into for sure.
What about portion sizes? How do you guys big plates or?
I mean, from young, it's probably the same in most South Asian families, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, of course, Pakistan, where if you go to someone's house or even at home, if someone isn't eating much, it's like, oh, what's going on? And when someone is eating a lot, it's like, mashallah, it's so strong. Even if, I don't know, probably that comes from in the past, historically, if our ancestors were farmers or didn't have as much food.
Yeah.
It was good to eat and make sure you had enough storage for the winter. But
you wouldn't leave the table feeling hungry. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I eat at his home, I'm never hungry.
Yeah. Even one of my British Indian friends, I remember going to their house after having dinner. And then, of course, their mum's so hospitable. She asks you, like, oh, do you want to have some food? Oh, I've just eaten. No is not an acceptable response. And after you eat, they're going to say to you, do you want any more? And you'll say, oh, no, I'm full. Oh, better? You don't like my food?
Yeah.
What can you do in those moments? It's tough.
Yeah, I've got that in Spain as well. Like my aunties, they always ask, do you want more? And if you say no, they still give you food,
Yeah.
They say eat, you're gonna. They think that if you don't eat enough, you're gonna be, unhealthy.
Yeah.
So sometimes you feel like the definition of healthy is okay, eat 3 plates at every meal, and that's how you're gonna get strong.
Yeah.
Which is not, that's like the kind of old school way of thinking.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think from a medical standpoint, probably the opposite is true.
Yeah.
Quite ironic, isn't it? You know what? When I was small, my father, he used to, when we would see a chubby child, he would actually call them healthy. I think that there are serious questions about how do people within that culture see health, and it's about education for people to sort of say, well, look, we all come from that culture and it's a nice culture and it all comes down to hospitality and it's good with good intention. But at the same time, do we really have to be making people feel bad when they don't want to eat as much? Does that really need to be considered an insult, especially when there can be some risks associated with that?
I wonder if there's not also a factor that's linked to generations, because when I look at my family on the Spanish side, like my father and his sister, they grew up very poor, so they didn't have much to eat.
Yeah,
and maybe that's why now they think that if you're fit, they don't think that you're healthy.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So like you said, if they see someone eating a lot, a bit, not overeating or something, but if you don't, in their eyes, if you don't eat enough, you're not healthy.
Yeah.
I think that's due to the fact that when they were kids, they didn't have much.
Yeah.
And now they have, food is more available.
Yeah.
So when we eat together, it's always, in my opinion, we always overdo it, So I think there's that factor as well. I mean, on our side.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. And it sort of gets into the territory of how have certain people from certain cultures changed in quite a drastic way over a short period of time. So, for example, if we look at the South Asian community, for many hundreds of years, if not possibly thousands of years, those people were farmers. They did labouring jobs in very, very intense conditions, hot weather, etc., for a long period of time, probably only ate one meal a day. So if that one meal a day was very calorific, was very calorie dense, a curry, for example, that would then sustain them for them to be able to work for the whole day. Now, let's say 50 years later, the descendants of those people, so for example, my grandparents were of that generation, they grew up in sort of post-partition Pakistan in the 50s. So at that time, they were probably still agricultural workers. 80 years later, me as their grandson, I've still got the same genetics, but my diet is not the same. So if I was to continue with that diet, but my routine is different, we can see then how you may run into difficult territory. Because as a doctor, I spend a long time per day at my desk when I'm seeing my patients. So if I'm eating calorific food, but then not doing the same amount of physical activity, you can see then how you're going to run into problems. So I think it's a really interesting point that Clem made about, how, I guess, cultural views have withstood the test of time, but the way that we live our lives has changed.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, that links even within my own family. My mum, when she first came to the UK, they didn't have a lot of money. She said that they would maybe eat meat once a week.
Yeah.
Now people are going to have a lamb or chicken curry almost every day. And my grandma, Punjabi, she would be at home and often only eat one meal a day. So even in her 70s, I remember her being very active and healthy. She'd wake up in the morning, she'd have like one paratha, one roti, a little bit of curry, and that was her good. Whereas now, because we've got that accessibility and we've got money as well. But I noticed it whether in the South Asian community in the UK or in Pakistan, body types, you can kind of see like the people's, I guess, muscle to fat ratio and body fat percentage. You can kind of see that diet is definitely affecting the body types. And there are quite a lot of, I don't know if this is the scientific term, but kind of skinny fat body types that I noticed when I was out there. And I just in that moment was thinking, this must be from the diet, because I spent a lot of time in other parts of Asia, in Thailand, in Korea and Japan, where even if people aren't active, like they're not doing like Muay Thai or anything, they're relatively lean. So I really think that this conversation is hard to have, but it's so necessary.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that it's certainly, it touches on, I think, concepts that people hold quite sacred, their food, which is a part of their culture and which has been the same for many hundreds of years. But the reality is, though, is that times have changed. And I think one of the conversations that I sometimes have with some of my patients in this particular field is that when patients then unfortunately become unwell as a consequence of, for example, let's just say for the purposes of this, bad diet, if they are then looking at possibly becoming diabetic, and there are, very serious ramifications of that, that can then be almost not a wake-up call, but it just basically symbolizes there can be consequences to us doing certain health habits. And the question then becomes, how do we sort of prevent getting into that situation in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know, again, you're the doctor, but I know that these things are often higher within our community, diabetes. And it is always like once someone gets to that point, now we need to make the change, rather than having that preventative approach of, again, starting when you're young, the habits around, I mean, some South Asians drink, some don't, but in France and Spain, you bring a bottle of wine to the house. In our community, it's often chocolates and cakes and desserts. And again, saying no to that is something like a refusal of someone's hospitality. It's rude, but I don't know, how do you do that if someone's offering you cakes or desserts? What advice can we give from a doctor's perspective to overcome this?
So I think with my, I guess, doctor hat on, you touched on the point about sort of trying to prevent getting into that scenario in the first place. So I think that just comes down to healthy habits. It's just about recognizing, and actually you made a really good point about how the rate at which people within the South Asian community especially develop things like diabetes is much, much, much higher than the white Caucasian, Northern European ethnic demographic of the population. So actually, I think I was reading a statistic the other day that I think people who have South Asian genetics within the UK, I think they're like 6 times more likely to develop diabetes than someone who's, typically, I guess, British white. So that's massive. All right. So there is definitely some serious realization, I think, that needs to be done, but it's not all doom and gloom. That's the thing. These are preventative diseases for the vast majority of people. I think coming back to the point that you raised as well about how do we manage that in terms of going to people's houses and stuff. It's tough, you don't want to be rude, but at the same time, I think sometimes if you know that then you're going to go to someone's house and there's going to be like unhealthy food there, then you can just make sure that like in the lead up to that, you've had quite a healthy diet. So then if your friends invite you out for the burger the night before, you know, you've got to ask yourself, you know, like, so if one's got to be sacrificed, which one's it going to be? Do I want to upset my granny, or am I going to bail on the boys for going for a burger? You know, like,
it's so difficult. But I think thanks to Jack as well, after spending so much time with him, and if you haven't seen the conversation with Aftab and Jack, we'll put the link up to that in the description. But simple habits like chocolate, for example. Jack taught me that chocolate can be healthy. Just a dark chocolate without all the other ingredients in it. Tea, I love the chai, you know, a milky dudh patti chai. Milk and sugar taste delicious, but again, seeing that as a treat rather than the daily 6 cups that some people may have, and just switching to a green tea or any other healthier tea without any sugar. That for me, 2 simple things there. Moving from like sugary, refined sugar desserts to just dark chocolate, and then those milky teas to that. Even just something so small, over 5-10 years, that can make a huge difference to someone's health. And in our community, because again, a lot of us don't drink. So when you go to hang out, I mean, I don't drink or smoke, so shisha cafes for me don't really interest me. And then I don't really always want to go to a bar if I'm just going to be taking a soda water. So the 2 things that are, as you mentioned, burgers or milkshakes, Ferrero Rocher milkshakes, Kinder Buenos. I loved those at uni, but I had no concept of calories. So I was thinking, you know, I was training hard in the gym, but then afterwards I'd have a burger and a Kinder Bueno milkshake and realize like, why is nothing going? What would your take be on like the dessert culture and that kind of, you know, burgers, shakes, you know, the kind of environments that
I get about. I get it, bro. I mean, I you know, was born and brought up just outside of Manchester in the UK. So, you know, I'm literally from the heartland of that subset of ethnic culture, which is about the fact that, like you said, you're limited in terms of the social things that you can do. So then for a lot of people, they turn to fast food, and it tastes so good and it's widely available. And in that part of the UK, it's still quite affordable for a lot of people. So that's fine. And I get that. And look, you know, I love a burger as much as the next guy from Manchester. But, you know, I think there has to be some serious questions about habit. So to what extent are you eating these things?
You know, I find that when I have this conversation with people, there are 2 things that I would often hear back is either, you know, we're all going to die from something, or, you know, I want to enjoy my life, you know, not have to overthink and all these, or either people seem to not think that it will happen to them, that they will have you know, diabetes or something like this. Like what would be like your answer to these statements?
Yeah, so that's a common thing, man, that I think especially people who are quite young. So if we take men who are in their 20s and 30s, especially like young men in their late teens or 20s, that's a common thing that they say, oh, I want to enjoy my life, you know, I'll deal with that when I get to it. The issue is, though, is that these habits that we put in, they are easy to adopt and they stick for a long period of time. So you might not think it's a big deal, but I would, you know, just take some time to look at on a weekly basis, what are your habits of eating? You might find that actually you drink 3 cups of tea a day and they've got 2 sugars in the meat. That is, if you then look at how much sugar that is compared to your daily recommended intake, that's significant. You then times that, we've just said that's 1 day. What about over 10 years, 15 years? These are habits that persist for a long period of time. So over time, they do create really quite a problem. All right. Statistically speaking, you're much more likely to get a chronic disease, meaning a disease which is going to occur in the sort of, you know, in the middle to later parts of your life and stay with you for life, like diabetes, for example, than for what you are statistically likely to get hit by a car. So that's what people say, you know, well, I could get hit by a car tomorrow, so I just want to enjoy my life and I'm just going to eat what I want. I appreciate that. But we've also got to live with a bit of statistical reality. The reality is that, you know, life expectancy in the vast majority, at least of European and Western world countries, is going up. So, you know, chances are you will probably live for quite a long time. So to what extent do you want to live healthy? That's the question that I would put to my patients.
Yeah, I think the matter is more about how do you want to live your life. Again, you know, we did a podcast about sobriety
Okay.
So I think moderation, it applies to food too. You know, we're not telling people, I love food, you know, any kind of food. So we're not here telling people that they shouldn't eat all these things that that we enjoy, but just learning moderation, I think
for sure,
it's very important too. So yeah, you don't have to go the radical route of
Absolutely,
you know, don't know if you saw Brian Johnson, that guy who's trying to like reverse aging.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. He had a Netflix documentary as well. Yeah.
So he just completely like just stops everything and has this very strict protocol. That's not what we're. Again, that's not what life's about either.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's free, right? But I think we still have to enjoy, as people say. Yeah. But just learn how to do it while also taking care of yourself and making sure that you can live a healthy life.
Exactly, bro. I completely agree. You know, I would always advocate sort of the middle ground. It doesn't have to be one of the extremes. Just changing small things here and there can allow you to achieve that.
Yeah.
You know? So, and I think actually when you veer too far one side or the other, that can also bring its own problems. So, for example, people like that who are very, very, very health conscious, it may get to a point whereby there are questions about to what extent is this affecting this person's ability to even function like someone who's normal, you know? So if you're just purely concerned about every single thing that you do being healthy and you're constantly thinking about that, is that really a healthy state of mind to be in fundamentally?
And then you have the issue as well with people who do these very extreme diets that are not sustainable. They stop after a month or even 2 weeks. And then they go even more extreme with the unhealthy habits.
Super important, bro. Really, I actually think that's a really, really good point that you've raised. And I think especially just coming back to like sort of the culture that we come from, the South Asian community, there's a lot of that. You know, people sometimes they might be given some bad news by their doctor. Oh, my lipid levels are a bit high. Oh, I'm in the pre-diabetic stage, which is basically before you become diabetic. And you can sort of reverse that with diet and exercise. They might become quite extreme. And then sometimes they can just crash. And then actually when they crash, and that might be associated, if that's associated with a binge, that can actually undo a lot of the work. So it's about sustainable, small things. That's what I always advocate to my patients. Like definitely walk before you can run, but we don't want to stop walking.
For sure. I mean, that's it. We talk about the British Asian community, but again, after spending time in Southeast Asia and East Asia, it really redefined my concept of aging. And that even this is relevant to the white community in the UK as well, that here we often think once you've hit 30 or 40, let yourself go. But if you go to a gym in Korea or Japan, Clem and I both spent time there, people are fit. And what surprised me was that you can still see people having their desserts every now and again. But their main diet is just not as heavy. And I think what makes it really difficult for our community is that, as you mentioned, we really like those desserts and burgers. However, that's often compounded with food at home that is heavy. So what's quite common is you might get people who, you also mentioned like regularity, who literally eat curries every day because that's just the culture. And then after that, you've had dinner at home that someone's cooked. And then afterwards, do you want to come out and grab a shake or so we're going to go get chicken. So then you've got that compounded. And that's why child obesity rates are so high as well, because kids will get chicken and chips on the way back from school and then go home and eat a super heavy curry. So I think it is just trying to, like, Rome wasn't built in a day. And what actually helped me, again, was small things. Green tea instead of a chai. Dark chocolate instead of chocolate. Don't get the fizzy drink. That's easier than just boycotting ever going out for burgers. Oh, I don't need chips today. I've already had like quite a bit of carbs. And then you can still enjoy it without having to feel like you're completely banning yourself from anything that tastes nice at all.
No, I completely agree with you with that, bro. Like, I think it's small habits, and just having a conscious awareness of what's going on here. So I think that's that sort of, if you were my patient and you basically describe that to me, you know, the reflection that I would have when I'm making your notes afterwards, is I would, I'd at least be thinking to myself, this guy has thought about it. He's put in some time to just fundamentally ask himself where he is, where he wants to be in the future, and what sort of things he needs to do along that journey. Then that helps us significantly as doctors or as healthcare professionals, because we can work with that, because that's the way it should be. It should be a mutual conversation. So you come to me and you say, okay, you know what, Dr. Aftab, I've read about this. My parents have got diabetes. I don't really want to get diabetes when I'm older. What do you think? That's very different to then me telling someone, if you don't do this, you are going to become diabetic. We need to move away from that model. And actually in the UK, we've moved away from that model of healthcare. We practice now what's called like a mutualistic element of medicine, or mutualistic framework of medicine, where we have a two-way conversation, rather than the paternalistic system of healthcare that it used to be, which is you go and see your doctor and they say, do this, 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 and this. And you say, okay. And then you go out and you get like a burger and chips.
Really key point there though, because I think that also is applicable in the home. Because I remember a few years ago, I came back holier than thou and told my family, I'm not going to eat curry anymore. Throw away all this rubbish that we've got in the cupboards. And that just gets tension in the house.
Yeah.
So I found that by leading by example at home, just buying dark chocolate and dishing it out. Mum, try this. At the start, nah, I don't really like this. I'll go for peanut butter that's got no sugar in it, whatever, instead of some Nutella or something.
Yeah.
Little by little, people grow the habit and actually like it. So rather than accusing people and pointing fingers and saying, you've got to do this, if you do it yourself and offer someone, you can mirror their hospitality just with healthier habits. Dates. Dates for some people's cultures are a big part of it. So just, as they call it, nature's candy. You can integrate that into your routine. And I found that if I was starting a day with a shake with dates, peanut butter, organic honey, that's a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
But it's not the bad type. And for the rest of the day, I wouldn't crave any Kinder Bueno or Ferrero Rochers or all the other stuff.
It's the question that I think that I would have there is it better than starting the day and having breakfast that is a very sugary cereal, not mentioning any names or any brands? All right. But there's a lot, you just walk into any supermarket. We're here in the UK where still the amount of sugar in our food, from what I understand, is still a bit more regulated compared to what it is on the other side of the Atlantic in the States. I think some of the regulations that they've got there in terms of by law what they're allowed to put in food is not as strict as what we are here in the UK. So it's very possible then that you may start the day eating food that you love and it's been part of your life since you were small, but it's not good for you, and you could have something that you also enjoy and don't mind the sound of, that you can swap it over, and you'd be surprised, 1 week, 2 weeks down the line, you might not want to go back to the previous one.
Yeah.
It's like people who drink coffee with sugar. The first time you have coffee without sugar, you're like, yeah, exactly. You're like, what's this, man? This is like some mud latte, right? But then you know what? Like when you break that habit, and especially if you're a coffee drinker, a week later, are you going back to the one that's got the sugar in? 2 weeks later? I don't think so. Probably not. That's a positive health improvement that you've made. Small thing, man.
For me, that exactly what happened. I used to have all these sugary drinks, and now if I taste a coffee with sugar, it tastes weird because it's just acquired taste. It is literally the habits on your tongue. But what I'd like to ask Clem, being a kind of observer of our culture, you spent years and years you've spent with us. What's your kind of perspective on this from the outside? How does it look? And is there any advice you'd give to us basically in how we can evolve?
Used to be too spicy for me. Now I'm good.
We trained him well, actually.
Yeah,
the first time he had our curries.
I trained with Hakim and Jamal. But for me, I think I see a lot of similarities, not in terms of the flavors, but maybe more, just very, very generous portions. So in Spain, that's the same. When I visit my family and we eat together, we always make sure that everyone has enough on the plate. I don't eat much desserts. Rarely. Sometimes I crave it. He's going to laugh, but sometimes I just crave a dessert. So I have a dessert whenever I crave it, but it's rare, right?
Yeah.
But when I go home to Spain, it's almost at every meal that I get offered a dessert. So I think we also love sweets. And so yeah, I think from that side of things, I think there are a lot of similarities. You know, I often think that in Spain, people, sometimes they just maybe eat too much. You know, so I don't know if it's in the whole of Spain, but where my family is from is Galicia.
Okay.
So I see a lot of similarities, you know.
Yeah.
As I was saying, my father's generation, they grew up in the 40s, 50s during the dictatorship. They didn't have much in a small village, and now they have access to food.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's everything at home.
Yeah.
Everything.
It's a very sudden change very quickly, I think, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, in my family, there's a lot of problem of diabetes and high cholesterol. So these are all related to these habits.
Yeah,
which were not things that they learned when they were young.
Yeah,
I mean my father's generation, but things that they, from the way their life changed. But the problem is that get passed on to the next generation. It's like, okay, I didn't have much when I was a kid, but now I'm going to feed you. Yeah. I'm going to feed you like everything possible. But
yeah. So I think that's a really interesting point, though. And I had my my medical hat on when you were talking about that, and it just made me think there are a lot of similarities between different cultures too. So I think that sometimes we sort of see these issues as just affecting one subset of the population, but actually they affect a wider demographic of people, and we're all in it together, essentially.
Yeah.
We're all in it together, where especially you've just touched on diabetes in particular. So if we know that we are predisposed to getting that because of family history or whatever, then we can together put in healthier habits to then reduce that risk in the future.
But there are things that are just so embedded in the culture. Like you mentioned coffee and sugar. In Galicia, wherever you go for a coffee, you're rarely going to pay more than €1.50, which is about £1, right?
I need to get me there, bro.
Yeah. The thing is that they give you 2 of those sugar sachets. It's like double. So it's like if you would get 4 of those sachets that you get here.
And do they put it in the coffee, bro, when they give it to you?
They just put it on the side.
Okay, okay.
But it's just the fact that it's there. A lot of people, they just use the sugar. So these little things that it's just common to do that are not helping, because when you have the temptation, it's right in front of you, they give it to you. At least they could maybe give 1 sachet instead of giving 2, or let people take it.
Yeah.
Like you'd see here in some coffee shops where you take the sugar.
Yeah.
I think that would be better. And because coffee is so cheap, and it's also a cultural thing to drink coffee at pretty much any time of the day. I think we drink a lot of coffee, but because of that, also we consume a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
So these little things that are so embedded in the culture that could change for the good of people, but that's how it is.
Yeah. That's super interesting, man. Yeah, we're not forced to do any of these things, though. So like when we choose to rip open that sachet and dunk the sugar in, but that's still a choice that we're making at that time, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like boss man in the coffee shop, you asked him for a coffee and he made you your coffee, bruv. Like he didn't put in like 4 sachets of sugar, for example.
Yeah.
He just gave you the choice, right? So then it comes, and we all have to make these personal choices all the time on a day-to-day basis. And it doesn't have to be something like which is laborious or which is getting you down. It's just being consciously aware, okay, you know what? I like sweet coffee, cool, but I like coffee more than I like sweet coffee. I drink 4 coffees a day. This isn't me personally. I'm just talking, for example's sake, I drink 4 coffees a day and I prefer sweet coffee more than like bitter coffee. But I've had 2 sweet for today, so I'm going to have 2 bitter. 1 sweet, 1 bitter, 1 sweet, 1 bitter, there's ways around it. It doesn't have to be one or the other. 2 sachets? Really? Let's go 1.5.
Exactly.
Let's go 1.5. 1.5, let's see, you won't be able to taste the difference. I promise you. From 2 to 1.5, you won't. And you'll be able to go from 1.5 to 1 as well. You've put it down by half, man.
Yeah, true. That's it. I mean, there are some places where they're only going to give you maybe one sachet.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe things start to change a little bit.
Yeah.
But then that's again the other issue where you have this like mentality of just people thinking like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. You know, I'm good. I'm gonna, or I just want to enjoy or these kind of things, you know. So I think we just have to maybe kind of switch this behavior of like overlooking prevention, you know, because I just find that there are just too many people who don't care until they have to.
Yeah, I know.
Whereas if you care about prevention, then you might not have to deal with those issues.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's very important.
It's a huge paradox that we celebrate overconsumption, yet we really, of course, feel so emotionally hurt when people do develop these conditions. And it's something that we have to, it's a kind of cognitive dissonance that we need to break as a community together and understand that this isn't offensive to you by me saying, oh, I don't actually want the sugar. This is just how another expression of love to ourselves and to our family members. And it's something I did notice when in Galicia with Clem that is similar is the kind of battle when you refuse in the cultures. And it's a fight, you know, unfortunately. And it's so hard to go home and have arguments that I don't want the dessert because people take it personally. If I refuse the chocolate cake, they almost take it as if I'm insulting you for having it. And if we can move gradually away from that mentality and see it as just, my love to you is that I want you to be healthy. You know, I'm not forcing this date instead of chocolate, whatever buttons out of spite. It's because I love you that I want you to live longer. But it's so difficult, and something that I think these conversations can hopefully make people think about their habits, not in an aggressive way. This is all out of love for people. And it's hard when you see other communities who are able to moderate better. And enjoy their desserts without overdoing it. I mean, I know you're also half French, and a French macaron dessert is like so small. And in Asia, a big cake would be shared for the whole table to all have like a tiny little bit of. Whereas in our community, everyone's got a cake slice. So things like that, you know, sharing it together doesn't have to be everyone overdoing it. And you actually appreciate it more when it's reduced. Because I don't eat really oily curries that often now. When I do it, I'm like, whoa, this is life. This is what it's all about. Whereas when you're eating it every day, you can't tell me that you appreciate it as much as when you moderate it. So, I think we're getting towards the end of the conversation. So I do also want to ask, kind of ironically, what are both of your two's favorite South Asian dishes and curries?
Whoa, that's way too difficult.
Did you have a particular favorite dish first, baby?
I like a lamb biryani, bro. Like, you know, I love like a good lamb biryani. Like, I do, yeah. In terms of like curries, anything that's like, I prefer saucier curries, bro, to like ones that are a bit more thin. So like your curries, even sometimes some of the, I'm going to be honest, like sometimes some of the sweet ones, you know, that you can get in some of the restaurants, like the butter chickens and the chicken tikka masalas and stuff like that. Like they're the ones, bro, like so rich in flavor, but you know, I hold my hands up, like those are rare occasions when I'll get them. But yeah, man, like those are my my vices, I guess.
Butter chicken masala, a sweet butter chicken with some spice in it is just, again, guilty pleasure.
I love sagbor because, you know, the thing is, when I was a kid, even now in France, I hated spinach.
Right.
That would be my worst nightmare to see on the menu at school.
Is that a big thing? Like, is spinach a big part of the typical like diet in Spain? Did they eat it?
I have more memories of it because I grew up in France. I have more memories of like turning up to the school cafeteria and I see it and I'm like, oh no, you know. And just even at home, I always hated the way we cooked it in France, right?
Okay.
But then I went to Hakim and Jamal's home and I just rediscovered spinach, you know. And I love this. I love this dish. So that would be my favorite.
It's my favorite as
Fair
well.
enough.
Yeah.
But how can we take something so healthy as spinach? And this is it. Like, I love the flavor of it so much. And again, there's a lot of vegetable curries, chickpeas, all of these dishes. There are a lot of nutrients in those vegetables. It's just, if you overdo it with the ghee, with the salt, with the oil, unfortunately, it kind of backfires. So I think that's it. All of our eyes lit up when we were speaking about these dishes. We love the food, but hopefully moving forward, we can moderate and therefore appreciate the food of our ancestors more. But yeah, Dr. Aftab, any final points that you would say to people, South Asians, but not just other South Asians, anyone who wants to live a happier and healthier life, and any final messages?
I think just spend some time to just reflect. So that's the first starting point, is just put in some time where you just think about where you are at the minute and where you want to be in the future. And then the second step, so the first step would be just spend some time to just think about it, seriously think about it. And the second point would be, what small habits can you change? Because we all know that we need to change some habits, right? Even if it's just drink more water, right? Okay. Exactly. Right. So things like that, start to then put in small habits, right? With the intention of they're there to stay, and then build them up over time. And you'll be surprised, a couple of years down the line, maybe even months down the line, your outlook on things and hopefully your health overall will hopefully improve. It doesn't have to be drastic things. Small things with a good long-term view for the future. That'd be what I'd advise you.
Great message. And to everyone who did watch this, well, firstly, big thank you,
thank you
to
man.
you, Doctor.
Thank you guys for having me on. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, if you have taken any value from this episode, we'd really appreciate clicking the like button, subscribing, letting us know maybe you have some habits and advice that you can give to us as well. Let us know in the comments. And if you know anyone who you think could also benefit from this discussion, please do share it with them. But until next time, thank you for watching and see you soon.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.